basics about sequential circuits, and then we'll have a corresponding one Verilog exercise where we'll do some sequential logic modeling using Verilog. Okay, so before understanding the basics, let's first understand what a sequential circuit is. Sequential circuit essentially means that my output depends on present input as well as past inputs. So the statement is quite generic in nature, which means that we not only depends on the present input but also past inputs. How many past inputs? What past inputs? That's all an interesting question. So, for example, let's say this is a block which is taking A, B, C as an input, and Z is giving the output. So in combinational logic circuits, we have seen that my Z is always the function of current value of A, B, and C. Please note it that whatever is the current value, that would determine the Z value or the output value. But in case of sequential circuit, my Z would depend on not only the current value. So let's say A's current value at time t is t, AT, and then sometime before that, this unit 1, 2, 3 is again not very clear and defined, but the past values, all the past values. Okay, similarly, all the past values of B, all the past values of C. So this looks like a quite generic statement. Now this raises a lot of questions also, that how many past inputs? Okay, so based on that, how many past inputs, we classify the sequential circuit in two types: finite memory system and infinite memory system. In infinite memory system, we say that the output depends on all the past inputs starting from time 0. After time 0, whatever variations has been taken in that input, all of those would impact the output. And similarly, on the other hand, this finite memory system will take into account only some fixed past memory, past values of that particular input. So let's say past 4 inputs or past 6 inputs or past 1 second input, something like that. That's it. Okay, so if you see, if we give a practical example in nature, so we see that most of the systems are actually sequential in nature. So, for example, if an instructor will ask you a question today, your answer would be different. And let us say the instructor has asked you the same question after this particular lecture, then your answer may be different, because your response system does not depend on the question, but also whatever is stored there in your mind and whatever has happened in past. So let's say the same question was asked in the previous time, so you would see what behavior has been happening in previous answer, so that would impact your current behavior, correct? So similarly, if we look around in nature, most of the systems are sequential because they don't depend on the current inputs, but also on the past inputs. Okay, but since we are making machines which are supposed to be deterministic, which are supposed to behave in the same way all the time, so we have to be very concrete about how many past inputs and what type of past inputs. So several questions would arise here. So the first question I would say, should I store all the past inputs? And where to store? Should I create some memory elements, or if I am storing all the past inputs, probably it would require a huge memory. And huge memory will also not be sufficient. Let's say the input is changing after every nanoseconds or every millisecond, and since the start of time equal to 0, so in years you will have petabytes of memory. Correct. So storing all the inputs is practically not possible, not feasible, and not practical also, because how will we compute? Correct. So how many inputs to be stored and which one? That's also an important question in that sense. So I see from the first point, it is concluded that we cannot store all the values. It is practically infeasible. It is practically inviable also, since it would require petaflops of memory. So those that memory is certainly very costly. So and also very difficult to process. So we need to probably select some particular inputs, and how many inputs to be selected, which ones? Okay, that will remain a question. And then how much memory would be required to store all of that? So we certainly would like to minimize that memory, that although the system would depend on the past input, but we would like to minimize the past storage. Okay, so the solution is essentially in the digital, the synchronous system, the solution is that we try to identify distinct states. Okay, so let's say they're infinite memory system. In the infinite memory systems, we are trying to identify that in which state a particular input will be. Okay, so if we are able to identify those distinct states, and then we can say that based on the input, how one state would be transitioning to second state or the other state. Okay, so these transitions, if we can understand and if we can identify those states, then we are done. Then these will become finite states. And that is why these are also called finite state machines, that the number of states in the system, although it may be infinite memory system, that means your output depends on all the past inputs starting from reset 0. But all of them has been captured in some finite states. These finite states could be 2, 3, or 4. Okay, so one popular example here is, let's say we would like to calculate parity. So although we are starting from state 0 or time equal to 0, we can always calculate what is the parity. There are only two states. Either it's going to be even parity or odd parity. So and that can be calculated. So this even parity and odd parity state, they can be transitioned based on the current value, whether it is 0 or 1. So that way we can represent, although it is infinite memory system, but they can be represented using finite states. The only thing is we have to understand, or we have to recognize, identify those distinct states which are present due to this infinite memory. Okay, so if we have identified those distinct states and then their transitions, then half of our job is done. Then we have understood how we can design these sequential circuits. Okay, so with this background, now the next important concept here is that most of the sequential system which we design in our digital systems are called synchronous sequential system. Synchronous means that they're all synchronized with one particular signal, and that one particular signal to which they are synchronized is called clock. You can call it anything, but it is called clock. So clock, because it represents time. So they are all synchronized with clock. So that means all the state transitions will always happen whenever clock will change at same time. Okay, so all these, because all these state changes are happening synchronously, means at the same time whenever clock is changing, then only states will change from one state to other state. So if such kind of a synchronous systems are there, then you will get a definitive advantage, because they're more reproducible. They are more always they will behave the same way. Okay, so in this talk also, or from now onwards, whenever we are talking about sequential systems, we focus only on asynchronous systems. We mean only synchronous sequential systems. So synchronous sequential systems we are using synonymously for sequential systems. Okay, So let's take some example that how these sequential systems are used. So let's say we have a serial port like USB. Okay, so it could be PS2 or USB. All these sequential ports, when they're connected to computer, so these USB ports particularly are you understand that these USB port you can connect a mouse as well as a keyboard. You can connect your mobile phone and n number of devices, your printer, your scanner, everything can be connected using your USB device. How does USB device will know that it's a printer, scanner, or a USB or a keyboard? But it will only transmit one bit at a time because it's a serial interface. There are only two pins which can transmit one bit at one time. Okay, so I would require some kind of a sequential system where I can remember that what was the bit which was transmitted some time back. Okay, most of them would be, of course, finite memory systems because you need to bother about probably last 10 bits, 20 bits, or maybe last 2000 bits. Okay, so now we again need to identify that whether these sequence of bits, whether they corresponds to a control command or data. So we need to identify. How do we identify? We have to identify certain patterns. If those patterns are found, then we can say that okay, this is possibly, then you will definitely say that this particular control command. For example, it is starting with data. Okay, so all this sequencing, or basically because we have to identify those patterns and we have to match, and they are all coming in a serial fashion. So it would need to remember whatever the previous inputs. Okay, similar thing. So once they are there, you also try to decode things as it goes on. Initially, you will try to identify patterns, and after identifying those patterns, then as soon as the inputs will come, you'll decode it, and you'll say that this is what it means. Okay, so these are the this is one of the example of sequential systems, and yeah, one very practical also. Okay, so some more concepts that let's say if I have a sequential system, the representation cannot be certainly this. There I say that A, B, C are the input and Z is the output. So it your Z, because it depends on some more things which are not probably explicit. So the way we usually represent these sequential systems are, there are certain number of inputs, let's say I1 to IN, and there are certain outputs O1 to OM. Okay, so additionally, there are certain states which are present in it, which are probably, let's say, P states, P, S1, S2 to SP. So whenever I need to identify what is the output function, let's say O1, this O1 would depend on, it can depend on all the inputs, I1 to IN, and it also depends on which state we are in. So essentially, any output depends on the present input and the states. And remember, these states capture all the past behavior of all the inputs. Let's say there are n inputs, it has captured the behavior of all the n inputs into p states. So p could be more than n, it could be smaller than n, that is immaterial. Okay, but what these p states are capturing, these p states are capturing all the past behavior of my inputs. Okay, so my current output depends on the current inputs as well as what are the present states. Similarly, these current inputs also will change these states. So that means my next state will depend on what are my current inputs and what is my present state. So a next state would depend on the present state plus what are the past inputs. Okay, so this is in summary, we can represent our sequential system or state machines. So we would require these five things. One is input, number of states, output, and a function for every output, which would depends on inputs as well as present states. And similarly, we also would require a state transition functions, means that if the current state is this, then how inputs would impact the current state, or what would be the next state based on the present input and present state. Okay, so these state transition function and output function, input, output, and number of states, these five things will be required to represent any state machine. Okay, so since we, yeah, this is a typical, let's say we have this kind of a state machine, the typical implementation would be something like this. So where you will store all the states into some state registers, and there would be input. Input need not to be registered, but I'll discuss why I have kept this input as registered. So there is, having state registered as a clock input is very much required. So all these states are stored in some sort of registers, and they're all driven by clock. So that means they're all synchronous to the clock. So they will change value whenever your clock will change. Okay, so your output depends on the present state and inputs that will drive your states output. And now you will see the output also have its own combinational circuit. Okay, so input to output still could be could have its own combinational circuit, but this control, or basically these states, may affect how that data path or how that combinational circuit is going to behave. So for example, let's say it's being multiplied. So input otherwise was being multiplied and output was a multiplication. But let us say because you are in state 0, then in addition to multiplication, you are also doing the sign multiplication, or you are adding 1, or doing some different things. So essentially there would be a combinational path, and this combinational path from input to output is usually called data path. So that's how your data is traveling. Your data is coming from input to output, and whatever circuit will come in the way from input to output, they would be called data path. And the control path would be the part of combinational circuit that determines what would be the next state. Okay, so whenever this next state is computed, and whenever right time of the clock will arrive, this next state will become the present state, current state. So this is how a typical synchronous sequential system would be implemented. Now, the question why input is also registered, so that would be answered probably in the next couple of slides. So right now we focus that this would implement, this would require certain registers, and we should understand what a register means. A register is essentially an array of memory cells. We can simply say flip-flops. Yeah, why not latches? That's an interesting question. That why do we use flip-flop, not latches? Okay, so because we want to be synchronous. That was the first requirement, or that was kind of a agreed upon thing, that we have to change whenever clock is changing. And when will clock change? Whenever clock is changing from 0 to 1, or whenever it is changing from 1 to 0. So that particular time instance, whenever clock is changing from 1 to 0, is certainly definitive. Okay, so you see, this is your clock. If it is latch, that means it is level triggered. If it is level triggered, the change can happen here, change can happen here, change can happen actually anytime in this level. But if it is level triggered, so that means whenever my clock signal is changing from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0, so that particular time instance of transition is quite definitive. And that is why we use flip-flops, not latches. And to summarize for others who are not able to recall, so essentially flip-flop and latches, both of them are memory elements, but latches will store the value whatever is given to it, and sometimes these latches are also like level sensitive, so you will have an enable signal or a clock signal to either it is sensitive to positive edge of the positive level of the clock or the negative level of the clock. So during the positive level, whatever changes are there in the input, that would be captured by your latch. Okay, but in flip-flop, the changes can be captured only at the falling edge of the clock or the rising edge of the clock. So this particular one is the rising edge, and this is the falling edge. Okay, so now there are various types of flip-flops we have studied in our books. D flip-flop, or delay flip-flop, T flip-flop, JK flip-flop, RS flip-flop. There are many. But to be simplistic, we can fairly assume, and although all of these can be used, but mostly whenever we are using in sequential circuits, delay flip-flop or D flip-flop are the most important one or most regularly used flip-flops in the sequential circuits. Why? Because what a D flip-flop is doing, it is saying that whatever is the value whatever is the value at this particular point of time D, and that would be the output for next one clock period in Q. So let's represent it using a diagram. So this is how we represent textually a D flip-flop. So there is an input D, there is output Q. There's another output Q bar, but we can safely ignore because Q bar is always equal to a node of Q, and there is a clock signal. And we always represent clock signal with this kind of an arrow, which means it is edge sensitive. If this particular notation is not there, where this edge, this arrow is not there, that means it could be a latch, it's not a D flip-flop. There is also possibility D latch is also quite popularly used circuit. Okay, so if there is a circle beyond this, then it means it's rising, it's a falling edge triggered D flip-flop. And if there is no circle here, then it is yeah, whenever you need a circle, so circle would be something like this. You will have a small circle here, so the circle would mean that it's a negative edge triggered, and if circle is not there, that means it's a positive edge triggered. So in this case, it's a positive edge triggered D flip-flop. And what does it mean? It means that whenever clock is positive, so let's say here clock was positive, at that time whatever was the value of D, at that time whatever was the value of D, that would be captured here. Yep. So it looks like instead of Q, this is Q bar. So there is some wrong capture here. Okay. So I'll correct that. So this is not Q, this is Q bar. And yeah. Okay, so whenever clock is there and it is, sorry, yeah, I again did some mistake. This diagram looks not correct. Yeah, this diagram is not correct. So it's taken from somewhere and somehow it means something else. But what a D flip-flop means that whenever a clock is and going from negative to positive, whatever is the value of this particular value of D, that would remain same throughout the clock period. Okay, so here it is being triggered both at the negative as well as the positive edge. So here again in the negative edge, this is the inverse part. Here the value of D was 0 and it is being same for that half the clock period. Okay, so it is D is actually sampled at the positive edge of the clock, and a value of D is passed to Q, and value of Q will not change during the whole one clock period duration. So that's a very important feature of D flip-flop, that whatever we sample at positive edge or the negative edge for one clock period, that value will be stored. There won't be any disturbance. Unlike latch, so latch, because it is level triggered, so if there is a variation during that active level, that would be see-through in the output. Okay, so one more important thing when we are saying all the time that it is sampling at the positive edge. So is that interval very precise? Okay, what is the precision level? So what would happen? Let's say D is little delayed than this clock. So it is slightly active little after this edge or little before. And what do this mean little? Is it picosecond? Is it nanosecond? It is milliseconds. So to define all those things very clearly, very crisply, there are two timing notations which are there. One is called setup time, another is hold time. So whenever your data is changing, it has to be there at least setup time before this clock active edge. This active edge could be rising edge or the falling edge. So whenever a clock active edge is there, so in this active edge, it has to be there at least setup time before that. Your data should not change before the setup time, and it should also not change during the hold time. So this setup hold window, during the setup hold window, my data is not supposed to change. What do I mean when I say it is not supposed to change? It means that, let us say data started changing whenever clock edge was there, exactly at this point. We don't know. The output will become undeterministic. You see, if you remember these edge triggered flip-flops, they are usually implemented using master-slave configuration. So there is a master and there is a slave. So master will capture the circuit, capture the state, and after that, the slave would be the negative level triggered and level triggered latch, and then it will push it back. So there would be a delay of your master and slave. So that means if my data is not there before this clock edge, that means we don't know how this master slave configuration is going to work. It can be undeterministic, not clear. So to be repetitive, to be definitive, okay, or to be correct, that's most important. To be correct, we always ensure that whatever setup time and hold time restrictions are given by the system, we honor that. As a designer, we always make sure that my signal will reach or my signal will get stabilized before the setup time of that flip-flop. Okay, so this was the basic of D flip-flop and memory element. So I can now use this particular information to infer that what would be the clock period. Okay, so now we also know that there is also going to be some combinational circuit, which could be a data path or which could be part of control path. So this T combinational is time which is required for my output to get stabilized or next state to be stabilized. So if I'm waiting my output to be stabilized, then it would be part of data path. If I want my next state to be stabilized, then it's part of control path. But essentially, my output should get stabilized, and whatever is the maximum delay of that combinational logic, that I call it T count. Similarly, there this T setup time and T hold time we have recently discussed that some whatever is the setup time of my flip flop, or this register is essentially an array of flip flops. So whatever is the setup time of a flop, that would be the setup time of the register, because register will have all these flops set up in parallel. So along with hold time and setup time, register will also have a propagation delay. Propagation delay means whenever again if we try to put a microscope, so that means that whenever although it is sampling my value of D at the rising edge or the falling edge, but the output would be reflected after some delay. So this delay we can also refer to the inertial delay, which we had discussed yesterday or day before yesterday. So there is some inertial delay within the register, or which we can also call propagation delay. So this propagation delay is T rank. Now, if I want to finish a particular task in single clock period, then the clock period means size of the clock, duration of the clock has to be more than the summation of combinational delay, setup time, and register propagation delay. So the assumption of this particular statement, the assumption of this particular statement is that T hold time is usually very, very less than propagation delay of register. So if you will analyze yourself your JK combination of or RS combination of your master slave combinations, you will say that T hold time comes out to be 0, but T setup time is some definitive time, and T register T reg register propagation delay is also a definitive time. So because of that, but in certain other implementation, there is small T hold time which is there. So this is how I would determine what is going to be my clock period. Now, after looking at all these basics, let's again revisit this typical implementation. So here we'll try to answer that why input is registered. Okay, so you see that the whole idea of this sequential circuit is that my state's synchronous sequential circuit is that my state will not change during one whole clock period. So I can utilize this particular property that states are not changing. So if I also clock my input, so I also make sure that input also will not change during one whole clock period. So I can do that by putting a register and giving the same clock to register as input as well as my state register. So if my input doesn't change for one clock period, my state doesn't change from one clock period. So I get a definitive time, very predicted time or definitive time that in which I have to make my output stable. I'm using this phrase multiple times, making the output stable or making the next state stable. What does it mean? So when you have seen, we have done this experiment of ripple carry adder, n-bit ripple carry adder, and 4-bit ripple carry adder. So we have seen that the basic delay to each gate, we have given only 1 unit of time. 2 input gate was given only 1 unit of delay. But we see that in some particular combinations, input combinations, delay was coming out to be 5 units of time. In some cases, it was coming out 7 units of time. In some cases, it was coming out as 9 units of time. So this time, we have to analyze theoretically. We have to analyze by looking at a circuit that what is the worst case behavior. So this worst case behavior or worst case time period is called longest latency. This longest latency we can calculate by looking at the longest path, or this longest path is also called critical path. So we will observe from the path will start from these input registers or state registers, and then we will follow all the gates which are there from the input registers to output. So, and then we identify what is the longest path and what is the delay in that longest path. So that longest path will give me that if that particular path is sensitized by giving a particular input, so that would result in the longest delay. So that longest delay has to be stabilized. That longest delay has to be less than the clock period requirement. If the delay is less than the clock period requirement, we will always get a predicted behavior, same behavior all the time. If somehow my clock, somehow my clock is smaller, then this longest path. So whenever that longest path scenario would occur, then my output will not be correct. Okay, so this latency of data path, this latency would determine what should be the clock period. Or in other words, the other thing is also true. If somebody else is determining clock period for you, for example, marketing or sales or your managers, they are deciding this should be the clock period, then you will design your combination circuit in such a way that you meet that clock period requirement. So you then, in that case, you will break your circuit into multiple clock period, so that the same task would happen now in multiple clocks or multiple clock period. Okay, so this way, this kind of a this typical implementation helps us quite a lot. So it also helps us in validation. It also helps us in verification, testing, because also in determining our critical path. Because now we need not to worry about all part of my chips. I can concentrate between two registers. So let's say this output is also registered. So I just need to bother about what happens between one register and the other register. I can identify all the paths which are there from one register to other register. That would we would be done with our timing analysis, with this analysis. So we have confined our whole circuit into this combinational circuit and some registers. So there would be different set of such combinational circuits, and we need to analyze each of them. Okay, so now I think we, if we take some example of this sequential circuit, that would help us. So let me take a very simple example, which is slightly unconventional also. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to implement 16-bit addition using 4-bit adder. Okay, so because we are implementing it using, we are implementing 16-bit addition using 4-bit adder, so that means it would certainly take multiple clock cycles or multiple iterations of this 4-bit adder. So this 4-bit adder would be utilized again and again. The way we can do it is, let's say we will input 16-bit A, 16-bit B in two registers. Both of these registers are 16-bit registers. So input has been received at same time. Okay. So, and then this input has been divided into 4-bit. Basically, 16-bit will have 4 nibbles. So we have divided our input into 4 nibbles. Now, what we can do is we can add one nibble at one time. So let's say least significant nibble. We add. This is all written in hex. So in hex, we are adding 82 and 25. And whenever, so this is at the beginning of clock cycle 0. So by the end of clock cycle and in the beginning of your clock cycle 1, by the end of clock cycle 0, your sum would be created. But when this clock edge will come, the sum would be transferred to this register. Okay, so that means at the beginning of cycle 1, we can see this, that the sum has been here, and along with that, the data would also need to be shifted. Now, what we can, instead of connecting all the 16-bit registers to this adder, only the last nibble can be connected to this 4-bit adder. So that means my content has to be shifted. So the content has been shifted, and we see now 26 here and 7A here. So and whatever is the carry, that carry also need to be stored and given back as a C in. That would also happen whenever this new clock will come. So that means my C out is also stored in a one bit flock. Okay, so similarly after cycle 1, after cycle 1 is over, the sum would have been computed, but as soon as this positive edge will come, this positive edge will transfer this sum to this particular register, and the content of this register would be shifted here. So see, all of these things are happening at the same active edge of the clock. So at the same active edge of the clock, this A7 would be transferred here, and whatever sum that has been computed during the whole one clock period would be passed on from here to here, and we see this. So now the sum A0 which was calculated, this A0 would be transferred here, and A7 is shifted this way. And similarly, all these registers which were there, they are also shifted in the right direction. My C out is registered, and this will also be viewable for the next C. So this way, cycle 3, cycle 4, by end of cycle 4, by end of cycle 3 or beginning of cycle 4, I would have a complete content here, and this register has been emptied. So if somebody has been quite smart, so he would have entered the, let's say this is the first operation. After this cycle was over, then there could be an entry of the next operand. So each operation you see is taking 4 cycles. In the starting of the 5th cycle, so there could be a new number which could have been entered here. So that means you will never see this particular register as empty register. There are always some data, and we can say that within 4 cycles you are able to compute a new sum. Okay, so this circuit is not complete because it doesn't tell you that how these things are moving and at all. So there is control part which is missing. So in the control part, there has to be at least somebody who is controlling that when to shift, when not to shift. Okay, so a 2-bit counter can be a perfect control unit here, which will say that the 0, 1, 2, 3, this counter will go on like this, and whenever counter is at 0, so it will select the C in from the outside, and also it will load the register A and load the register B. And after that, 1, 2, 3, it will for the next steps it will keep on shifting the register. That's it. Okay, so this way this whole circuit can be implemented. Now let's talk about the clock period. So if you see the clock period, the clock period would depend on the latency of my 4-bit adder and latency of the register read delay, or that also we call a register propagation delay. So that propagation delay would be the source of delay, and the delay of 4-bit adder, and the setup time of these registers. So these things will form the clock period. So that would be the minimum clock period that can be assigned. Now clock period, if it is more than that, then yeah, nobody cares. Okay, so with this example, I can stop for now, and yeah, we can discuss this also, that the same circuits, if we see sequential circuits, they could be utilized at various various places. Sequence detector, and we have discussed already controller. What is controller? Controller could be used in controlling circuits, controlling systems. So at all these places you need to have sequential systems. Designing of pipelining, hardware accelerators, memory based circuits, interfaces are most important because they have some specific protocol. So you need to remember that what was the previous state. So most of the protocol have their own different state machine inside them. So they will say that they will we have to follow those definitions of state machines, and most of this interface and protocols, they are essentially control systems. So these control systems would always be implemented using synchronous sequential systems. Okay, so with this, we can stop now. And if there is any question, I can take it up.